Karen O'Neill is an advocate for using plant medicines as a tool in addiction recovery. Having conquered a 35-year harsh bulimia addiction through the use of Ibogaine to interrupt the addiction and put healthy practices in its place, she now lives and works south of Ensenada in Mexico with recovering addicts in an Ibogaine Aftercare program. Karen is studying with Being True to You Addiction Recovery Life Coaching, the only known life coaching certification program that covers the usefulness of entheogenic medicines as a recovery tool. Passionate about spreading the word of mostly unknown information and addiction, Karen also enjoys time with family and friends, whitewater rafting, and travel. Please, a warm welcome to Karen O'Neill.
Hi, everybody. It is so good to be back in my hometown, Portland. I went to kindergarten here, first grade, been living and working in Mexico for the last year, but I see so many familiar faces. Some people I've met in Mexico, and they're here today, and community is such an amazing thing. So first of all, I just have my standard disclaimer. Ibogaine is a Schedule I substance. So it's not legal here, but you can go to Canada, Mexico, many European countries, Africa. You need to choose a provider carefully. You need medical testing if you have a problem with your heart or your liver. You're not a good candidate. That's really about it. There's some health risks, which I just basically covered. Okay, who am I anyway? So as Tom said, 35 years of bulimia, and this was a raging problem. Every 2 hours, binging and purging, about 90% of what I ate. So I did 2 floods. The first one was just I was looking for a magic pill, and Ibogaine is not that. But it's a powerful addiction interrupter. So for about 30 days, sometimes longer, you're reset back to a point where you're a child. You still have your adult memories, but a child will not want to binge and purge or smoke a meth pipe or shoot up or, do those usual self-harm things. So I tried all the usual stuff, 12-step groups, counseling, all the SSRIs, and repeatedly, even I was in an inpatient program for a little while, nothing really worked. I forgot to advance this. Okay. So I did 2 floods. The first time I was clean for 6 weeks, which was amazing because my clean time was measured in days, not weeks, not months, not years like now. I'm, coming on 2 years, soon. Thank you. I don't really like to keep track of the time. I'm looking forward to the day where I have to think, that was maybe 5 years ago? I'm not really sure. I'd have to check. But I got an opportunity to go to Mexico to work at a new Ibogaine Aftercare clinic. A Facebook friend of mine, now a close personal friend, put up an announcement for volunteers. And when I was done chewing him out for saying, why didn't you tell me about this? We arranged I would come and I would be the cook. And the reason for doing that was I did my own aftercare. And I knew what to do, but it's better to have a village setting and a community setting. So I was being selfish. I was doing it for me. And as it turned out, it was just getting started, very loosely based. Someone needed to come in and say what needed to be done, set the schedule, blah, blah, blah. And so I elected myself, and I've been there for over a year now, and I love it. So just a little bit about getting bulimics out of the closet. Thanks to 12-step groups, for about the last 50 years, we have people able to talk openly without shame, about alcohol addiction, about drug addiction. And this is really important. But bulimia is something that people aren't comfortable talking about because it involves gluttony and it involves purging deliberately, and it's frankly disgusting and repellent, as it should be. And so we thrive in the closet. So again, I elected myself to be an advocate for this. I'm going to always be talking about this until someone shuts me up and they put me in the ground. That's true. That's true. So now I'd like to get into what IBOGA and Ibogaine is. So it comes from a shrub. It's about this high, grows in the rainforest of West Africa. And it's been used for, we don't know how long, the millennia, for coming-of-age ceremonies for children. I don't know about what age, puberty, I would guess. And also spiritual initiation ceremonies, which is more common now. And they shared their information, so a couple of tribes were doing this, and the extraction of the root bark is Ibogaine. And this was developed, 50 or 60 years ago. So this was discovered by accident. There was a man by the name of Howard Lotsoff. He was 19. He was a heroin addict. And he was just basically looking to trip balls. And he did. A chemist friend handed him a couple pills from the freezer. And so he took them and had this experience that he thought that was weird. And then he noticed that he didn't have the urge to shoot up again. He had completely detoxed and had no withdrawals. So he was really curious about this, and he decided to test it with some of his friends, because drug addicts have friends, that they, a community. And I think it was like 6 or 7 of them tried it, and all but one got clean and stayed clean for a good length of time. So he devoted his life to promoting and legitimizing this as a treatment for addiction. And it's still very young. There's not enough recovery places yet. There's not enough people that know about this, that this is an option. But this has, if you combine it with Precare and Aftercare, setting intentions all the way through, developing a new life plan to put healthy habits in place. Because if you're an addict of any kind, about 80% of your thoughts are devoted to, how do I find it? How do I get it? How do I hide it? How do I lie about it? How do I, do all of this? And so all of a sudden you have all this free time. And so if you don't have a plan, and if you're not in an isolated setting, you're not going to know what to do. And maybe you'll pick up another addiction you didn't have before, like alcohol or something, not healthy and not high vibration and not, bringing out your highest self. There's a few ways that this can be done. There's a flood dose, and that's a high dose. And I'm talking just about Ibogaine right now because I just explained the difference between the two. But that's a high dose, and there's a low dose regimen, which is actually more Ibogaine over the course of 7 to 10 days. There's microdosing, and I think everybody in this room is a fan of microdosing. It's really the wave of the future. And a booster or a tune-up. So there's 5 parts to effective Ibogaine treatment. You have your Precare. So you're going to work with someone, hopefully, to really set your intentions and figure out what you want from the medicine, do some journaling, and then you arrive at the clinic, and they will check your level if you're a drug addict, which most of our clients are. You need to check for detox. Sometimes people, if they're on synthetic opioids for any length of time, because the United States in its wisdom thought this was the answer, and synthetic opioids are horrible. They stick to your tissue and your cells like a nail gun forever, and so that has to be completely out of you. So our doctor puts the client on morphine, which is short-acting, until it's completely flushed out of their system. And so then there's the treatment itself, and it could be one of the 4 that I mentioned, but it's usually a flood dose, occasionally a low-dose regimen that's getting more popular for people that don't want to do the heavy-duty psychoactive experience, because this is the granddaddy, as far as we know, of all psychoactive medicines. It's some powerful shit. Then you need to stabilize in the clinic for a few more days or up to a week. We want people arriving at our wellness center, the Aftercare, to be making their own bed, to be showing up on time, to be ready to do the hard work, because the medicine is only half of it. In fact, it's probably less than half of it. You really have to follow through, and that's the part that sucks. And that's what I discovered the first time I did it, and I did the work, but I didn't really do the work until the second time. So Aftercare, there's several places that do this, and I know most of them that do it like locally in the United States or in Mexico. And it's just about finding yourself and your center and exposing your truest, best self. And we were all born perfect, every single one of us. And life adds layers. We have trauma. We have maybe ancestor trauma, inherited. We have jobs and spouses and animals and traffic. And so you got to get away from all that. You need at least 30 days off your life in a healthy setting with loving and supportive people. So we do yoga, breath work, journaling, exercises, recovery circles. We have a Temescal, which is an ancient Mayan sweat lodge. That's pretty cool. You go into this dome, and it's hot. There's a few doors. There's drumming. There's singing. It's an isolated environment. Pretty cool. And then when the clients are ready, we have other sacred medicines that we work with, too, like psilocybin, peyote, ayahuasca. And these are good a few weeks later to help lift off the residual, and reconnect you. Ibogaine kicks your ass. And if you're detoxing, it kicks your ass, I'm told, way harder than what I went through. I loved my experience. And then all along, you're working about reintegration. So developing a plan for when you go back to your home and your life, what you want it to look like. Because if you just go back to the same old stuff, you're going to keep doing the same old stuff that you did before. You'll recognize you're triggered. Well, what do I do when I'm triggered? I'm going to go drink a jug of whiskey. That's what I'm going to do. And even if you don't crave it, the chances are pretty good eventually you'll do that. Okay, so I'm going to just explain a little bit about the flood dosing. I kind of went through it already. You're in a dark room, sensitive to light. There's music playing that has binaural beats that helps the medicine work better in your brain. The brain stem distributes the medicine, and it cuts it right up through the cerebral cortex, and it disables motor function. And forget about depth perception. You need help walking to the bathroom. You need to stay hydrated. That's very important. And it slows the heart and your breathing down. And you can feel that happen. So you're basically toxic. The low-dose regimen is, as I said earlier, a larger amount of Ibogaine given over the course of 7 to 10 days. And you don't have the visions. But you'll still see fractals and lights, but you'll notice clarity. And this is good for really hardcore people or people that have a lot of trauma or emotional issues and they're afraid of, the big flood, and it's becoming more popular. And you're able to relate to yourself better, understand yourself better, relate to people better. You can identify harmful thoughts and actions and behaviors that just get you in trouble with yourself and with everyone around you. It's an observer status. Microdosing, I think we all know what that is. Small amounts. It's taken about every 3 days. You just need to adjust to make sure, you're not in a psychoactive state if you're working, but it's very helpful. And then a lot of clients want a booster or a tune-up, which is a larger dose, more than microdosing, less than a flood dose. And that really helps them a few months later when they're back to their life and they're struggling. It just kind of pulls them back to the center to remind them of all the work they've been doing. The first phase of flood dosing lasts about 5 to 10 hours, and that's when the visions come. And for me, I had a really clean, powerful first experience. Saw spirit animals, and then little scenes from my life going, across. It showed me, because I was bulimic, culverts of vomit just spewing out 10 feet at a whitewater pace. And then I saw sinkholes imploding into the earth, also a vomit. And this is pretty horrible, but the medicine is telling this is what you've done to your life, and this is what it looks like. And so because I'm a graphic designer, it was showing me in images that I could understand, and then a little bit later it was telling me in words what I needed to do. Don't procrastinate. Pay your bills on time. I mean, all the things we know to do, but as an addict, I sure as hell wasn't doing any of that. So most people's visions really vary. Sometimes people have weird stuff like Holocaust visions, or it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It could be very literal, or it could be figurative. symbolic, but it always means something. And then again, the medicine always does what it wants. Forgot to mention it opens up the third eye. It blasted my third eye wide open 4 years ago, and ever since I can connect with things and with spirits and with images that I couldn't before. The pineal gland tends to calcify after a while. So after the vision stop, you go into an introspective phase where you're still laying in bed, you can't really do much. Not a good idea to be on the telephone. Not a good idea to be interacting with people. The environment is really calm. I wore sunglasses for 4 days inside. I was so sensitive to the light. And most people aren't sleeping by then. And if they do, that's like a major win. So the last phase is the next 72 hours or so, just as the body starts to normalize again. You're starting to see that things are different. It's all love and light and unicorn and rainbows. You just feel nothing but love for everyone. You feel the relief that this addiction, this trauma, all of these things are just poof gone. I mean, they're just gone. There's nothing like this. But you have to surround yourself with caring and loving people. And what my provider told me was no douchebags for 30 days. Turns out that's a really good way to live your life. And thank you. I have to say, in the last year, I've only attracted the best people into my life because, as I said, my flood was about 18, 19 months ago. And there's David over there. I met him in Mexico, and here he is today. Casey, my good friend and mentor, we've worked together with clients on and off in Mexico, locally on site, over the phone. Just a big shout out to those people, to Tom and Needham for doing all this. Thanks to Portland Psychedelic Society. I met all you wonderful people. And Aftercare. I think I said all this. If you can't do your own aftercare, go somewhere that's safe. I ended up going to visit my cousin in Las Vegas, and she ended up in a horrible fight with her now husband, and it put me fetal. So you think everything's great, but you're actually really fragile. So you need a good integration plan, good aftercare, things to do every day, a schedule, a new life plan. This is all critical. I don't know if you can see these photos, but this is where I live and work for the last year. It's an old hotel. It's built around a courtyard. There's panoramic views on 3 sides. There's a horse to ride. There's hot springs not too far away. The Temescal you can see there on the left. Well, maybe you can. So we would generally start yoga in the courtyard in the morning inside if it's raining. Just start that day off with working it out on the mat and leaving your problems and cares on the mat, and then going into, of course, breakfast. And then we would have a daily check-in and recovery circles and whatever was planned for the day. It's really rewarding work. I need to back up what Tom said. The war on drugs is bullshit. It's wasted money. It's cost lives. It's spread misinformation. So many people are afraid of psychedelics, including my own son. And we still all tend to believe deep down somewhere, all of us, that if we do LSD, our baby's going to have 3 heads, because that's what we were told, for generations. And in fact, this is repairing medicine. We heard about the psilocybin microdosing earlier, and this is, it does brain repair. It does all kinds of amazing things, and the Ibogaine is the most powerful of them all. It's a complete reset. It's a defrag. The molecule goes through every area of the brain and scrubs it clean. And so that, again, if you're going to do this, do it right, do it safely, have the medical testing done, and have a plan all the way throughout, and take enough time out of your life to do it right. So at this time, I'd like to open up for any questions. It's cheaper to do root bark extract, and we do offer that. But it's teaspoonfuls given, and it tastes awful. But we have a whole, initiation ceremony. It's very lovely and very beautiful. It's over, like the low-dose regimen, it's over a period of time. But there's usually nausea, too. Yeah. And a lot of people on Ibogaine had nausea. I didn't. And I think that, for me, given my particular background, that was symbolic and appropriate. Oh, no, but when you're doing the root bark, you're not down on your back, you're not ataxic, because again, it's more of a lower dose. Basically, no. Well, you could, and that's how it was done traditionally, but we don't in particular. The guy that we work with is a Buidi initiated guy, and he doesn't do it that way. And it's partly because we're in a remote location and an ambulance would be 45 minutes away, assuming we could even get one because it is Mexico. And we just have to be careful. The clinic is in Rosarito. Where we are is in a village south of Ensenada, a good bit, and up in the high desert mountains. Village of 530 people. Yeah. Okay. Lady in the blue. I'm pretty sure I read that, but I don't remember it. It's a big point, the sustainability of root bark. It's going fast. People are ordering it from Africa. There's street hustlers on the streets just like anyone else peddling this stuff, and they don't care where it came from. They just need to, put food on the table. It's a real concern. A lot of clinics will only work with ethically sourced IBOGA and Ibogaine. I can't speak to it personally myself because I don't know. I'm not involved on the clinical side of things. But it's very important. We also need to get this stuff growing. We need to get some, terrariums going. And, it's about an 8-year maturation process. And if you harvest it too young, it won't work as well and you'll get some nasty side effects. So thank you for your question. Yes, not where I work, but at the clinic, absolutely. And medical equipment. It's all part of the same business because it all goes together. But basically, the client will come in, they'll fly into the San Diego airport, go to Rosarito, get picked up by one of our drivers, and go straight to the clinic. And the clinic is a home, it's a nice big home. So it's a comfortable home-like setting. And then on the day of the flood, there's testing done, there's medical testing if they don't have it from the States, and about half the people don't, just to make sure that we can do this. And they're there for about a week, usually. Longer if they have to detox off of synthetics. During the dosing treatment? So you're awake for the first 24 hours, everybody. Well, yeah. And I was up for 4 days. So, and I've had clients even show up at the Aftercare Center, which is not in Rosarito, but 2 hours away in Ensenada, still not sleeping after weeks. So we just give them melatonin and hope for the best. Work out, do some exercise. Let's go for a hike. Let's get you tired. Yeah, and there's a reduced need for sleep for about a month, and again, you've had all this brain repair. GDNF is rebuilding the liver, converts the Ibogaine into noribogaine, and that's why it stays in your system for so long. So again, it keeps on working, and it can stay as long as 6 months, anecdotally. The hallucinations are actually, I would call them visions. They stop after 8 to 10 hours or 4 to 10 hours. You had a question then.
So the purging and then the visions, they seem to be part of the healing process. So have you
It's really hard for me to have an opinion like that because it really depends on the client and what they need. If a client has some kind of issue like schizophrenia or borderline, well, there's really no cure for borderline except for moderating it, learning how to regulate that. But if they have, touches of other personality disorders, then low dose is how they need to go. People that have a real hard time detoxing, low dose is better for them, although I don't know why. But most people, drug addicts, are used to risky behavior. So they're ready to just, where do I jump off the cliff? Let's do this. Natai Wellness Center, NATAI, yeah. And there's other centers down there too. And I'm familiar and friends with all of them. Lady in the back. It's all trauma. And I agree. Then you know more about it, and I appreciate the comment. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was making a statement replying to my statement that borderline there's really no cure for, and I was kind of talking about myself. It's about what I have learned to do with that over the years, and Ibogaine really helped me with that, is just learn how to self-regulate better. If I don't have an addiction in the way that's causing all of these upheavals in my brain, in my body chemistry, electrolyte depletion, it causes very extreme reaction. I mean, there's a reason I've been married and divorced 3 times. Right. And like Gabor Mate said, addiction is always rooted in trauma. And even people that aren't addicts, we all have trauma. And depending on our sensitivity, depending on our history, we would all be well served to learn ways to deal with that. And she mentioned that MDMA therapy, MDMA-assisted therapy, very good. And your question... Mm-hmm. Sure. The comment was she was surprised to hear that Ibogaine works for bulimia because it's well known for opiate addiction. It's somewhat known for alcohol addiction. Basically, the short answer is addiction, and it all attaches to the opiate receptors in our brain. So the Ibogaine goes through, clears that out, scrubs it, resets it. I didn't know if it would work. I looked online. I had a week to prepare for my first flood. I looked online. I found one woman in, Sweden or something, who treated someone with bulimia and said, oh, yeah, she's cured. Well, that was 3 days later. You don't know that in 3 days. So I'm kind of a pioneer and a gimme pig. I just figured if this could work, and like most drug addicts, I'm used to high-risk behavior, so I had no problem jumping off that cliff. And it works. So now I want the world to know it works specifically for other addictions. And there were other benefits, too. PTSD, gone. Migraines that I had from the beginning of menopause, like 15 years ago, I would have them once or twice a month, maybe once or twice a month now. A year now, I'll have a migraine. Diet Cola that I drank maybe a gallon every day. Took a swig of that a couple days later, spit that nasty shit right back out. So I've never smoked cigarettes, but if I had, I guarantee that first one would have tasted horrible. Most people doing Ibogaine for addiction, though, they're already giving up drugs and alcohol. So they're not giving that up too. They need their crutch. And a lot of them give it up about a year later if they're doing better.
I have a question about Kratom.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know of any of your clients that use Kratom as a useful thing because it can help with coming down off of, it stimulates your opioid receptors, but it modulates them. It doesn't overstimulate or block them, it modulates them. So I'm interested in Kratom.
I can't really speak to it except for we used it one time and it was helpful. We had a client show up. He was just going to do a week of medicine work. And he shows up and he goes in full detox as I'm driving south, from San Diego to the village where we are. And it's like, all right, what's going on? I know what it is, but he needs to tell me. So we were not prepared for this at all. We're an aftercare center and we're a sacred medicine center. He needed to go to a clinic and get detoxed, which is what he eventually did. But in the couple days that it took to work all of that out and get his medical testing done, we just kept him stoned on cannabis and gave him kratom for breakfast. We stopped that a couple of days before the flood, maybe even longer, because there was a possible interaction and we didn't want to take any chances. But I can't really speak too much to kratom other than I hope the FDA round 2 doesn't try to do what they tried to do a couple of years ago.
Was that Special K cereal, the kratom for breakfast? Is that like a Mexican thing?
I,
Are there any attempts to synthesize Ibogaine?
That's a really bad idea. I hope not. The question was, what about synthetic Ibogaine? Is it being done? It probably is. I'm not aware of it. I think if it were to become legal in the United States, that's the way it would be handled. And big pharmacy would do it. They would take out the visions. They would jack up the price. I used to be outraged that this was illegal here. And now, until some of these other medicines like psilocybin and MDMA get pushed through for their efficacy in treating all of these things, I'm perfectly happy with it remaining illegal. I think it's better to just get a bunch of greenhouses going and grow. Someone has to fund it. Okay.
Not like IBOGA, but I was wondering for people for bulimia, when they drink ayahuasca, what happens there? Is that something you encounter?
That's a really good question. He asked, what about ayahuasca, considering I'm bulimic and many people potentially taking ayahuasca are bulimic and purging is almost always part of an ayahuasca experience. It turns out that what I was doing was a reenactment of trauma, childhood trauma, literally saying, I will control what goes in and out of my body. And it's a reenactment of sexual trauma, and I don't think I need to get more specific than that. It's a messed up way of handling it. What ayahuasca does is the purging. When you purge, you are told, think of all the things you want to get rid of. You can't heal until you've eliminated, right? So once I understood, actually before my second flood, a good friend of mine has a good friend who's now my friend, but she had been bulimic for years and years, and she was called to ayahuasca, and she told me, because I was in a space that's like, look, I'm still binging and purging every day. There's no way I'm going to stop that. She's like, this might help. Think of it when you are purging, think of what you want to get rid of, and invite good things into your life. I did that, and it cut it in half for about 2 weeks until I had my treatment. So ayahuasca I was actually replicating an ayahuasca ceremony for 35 years. I just didn't know it. So this is how humans react. We react to trauma to protect ourselves, but we also have the universal connection of everything and everyone that knows what's better. Thank you for the question.
I just have a comment.
Sure.
So it's, with what Oakland just did, it's decriminalized for production out there too. So if anybody wants to go grow it, they can do so comfortably in Oakland without any.
That's a good point. Yeah, Oakland is opening up all kinds of things. I'm wondering if there's going to be a bunch of challenges, but I haven't heard anything about it.
It's a first time law.
Thank you. I'm going to look that up and make some phone calls. Hi.
Mention about the kratom, that it has helped a lot of people, but it also can be really, really highly addictive.
It is addictive.
So everybody in this room should know that, especially if you already have an addictive process that you're working through, that kratom may not be what you want to get started on. As a recovery coach, I work with people who are like trying their hardest to get off of kratom, and just want to add that to the conversation.
Yeah, good point about kratom being addictive. And I think it's also a good time to talk about harm reduction. The problem with the 12-step mentality is it's all or nothing. Let's say tomorrow I fall off the wagon and I go and all-you-can-eat buffet and throw it all up. I mean, does that make the last 19 months meaningless? And I got to start all over again with a one-day coin or however they do it, 30-day coin. It's about harm reduction. So when it comes to kratom, that can be a problem. But if you're an opiate addict, it can be an effective tapering down thing. But you are going to eventually have to taper off kratom too. Go ahead.
So I think the context most of us hear of Ibogaine in is a hard reset, something to help people with extreme issues that they're not able to seek help for other things. But however, historically, it's been more of a rite of passage.
Absolutely.
So part of me kind of has a hard time reconciling that and seeing the direction that we're heading with the medicine, and whether or not it could ever potentially become more of like a personal, spiritual thing if it were treated in more of a ceremonial context, for an individual that maybe has a calling, but doesn't maybe have the classic scenario in their life that would call for some of these treatments. So could you maybe just speak to that a little bit and how, just the spectrum of usage and
the spectrum of usage of IBOGA versus Ibogaine being a traditional ancient sacred medicine versus a modern day addiction recovery tool. Let me think about that. I think there's room for both. I think there's a need for both. We don't have effective modalities in place. If you're a 12-stepper, chances of being clean after the first year are 5%. If you go to detox or rehab, maybe 10 to 12%. You got a better chance of going it alone. That's about 30%. So there's a real need. We have addiction epidemics everywhere. There's a bulimia epidemic that nobody's talking about. Thank you. Better? So I think there's room for everything and a real need for everything. This business, like any other business, I'm sure you've all heard of, horror stories of shamans. It's supposed to be enlightened. It's supposed to be helpful. It's like, yeah, there are people too. There's all kinds of terrible things happening, especially to women, or practices that are not of integrity. And I've seen quite a bit of that. And I also consciously choose to work with the best people.
Would you say we're maybe a ways away from being able to treat the medicine, in the way that ayahuasca is being treated?
Well, I don't like to see people go to the hospital for Ibogaine, especially if they're going to Mexico. They don't know the language. They're in a bright room. They don't understand what's happening. There's all these sounds and disruptions. That's a disrespect to the client and the medicine and the sanctity of all of it. I'm more of a fan to do it at an Airbnb or a clinic or a mansion on the beach. Those settings are a lot better when you're working with people that understand what's going to happen and you have the right set and setting. Set and setting is everything. So I would propose to you that with proper set and setting, it's still sacred. We still owe it to ourselves as individuals to be our very best and get rid of the things that don't serve us so we can invite in the things that will help us and help us serve our community. Thank you. Tom.
Possible two-part question, depending on how you answer the first part. One thing I'm curious about with Ibogaine or IBOGA, either of them. Going back to we were talking, somebody brought up the comparison of ayahuasca with Ibogaine. Mm-hmm. One of the things about ayahuasca that I've noticed, and I've brought this up before at different times and places, is that ayahuasca is the only medicine that I've ever met that decided whether or not she liked me before I ever took her. And I'm curious, is Ibogaine like that as well? Like, does Ibogaine make up its mind about you before you take it the way ayahuasca does? And if so, I
have not encountered that. If IBOGA, like ayahuasca, will make up its mind if it likes you or will work with you. I have encountered people that can't do ayahuasca after Ibogaine because IBOGA, the spirit of IBOGA, claimed them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is the grandfather, right? Ayahuasca is the grandmother. So, but, powerful entities, powerful spirits, and it really doesn't do any good to argue with them. You're not going to win.
One of the things that I like about ayahuasca, she sees you bare, like the whole thing.
I thought that I couldn't do ayahuasca because I tried doing it a few times, and it was a miserable experience that brought out all these feelings of self-loathing, and it was... Yeah, and I didn't get the good, but I wasn't doing it ceremonially. I was doing it with friends underground. We did the best we could. And I just kind of made up my mind not to do it again. Then I get to Mexico, and my director, my boss, is saying, you need to do this. This will really help you, because a year ago I was way more intense than I am now, and I just needed to dial it down a bit. And so eventually I did. And I had such a sensitivity to the medicine. If I would go to be an angel, just help run the puke buckets, I would be the first one throwing up without even coming within 10 feet of the medicine. It's like, sorry, I got to leave. I can't handle this. Just a sensitive spirit, sensitive to medicine around. Same thing with combo. Even if someone else is doing it and I'm walking by, it's like, uh-oh. Yeah. Just a real sensitivity there. But then we work with a couple of wonderful medicine people. They come in and out. We meet all these wonderful people. They might be there to do extractions or to teach a yoga class or whatever, but it's just been a real collaborative village type experience. And the two medicine men that I've worked with, one was light and lovely, and that was positive for me. I'm like, yeah, this ain't so bad. In fact, this is very good. It was very helpful for me. And the other guy, by the name of Oso, that's Spanish for bear, he works strict with medicine. He runs a tight ceremony where you're getting the most out of it. That was dark and deep for about an hour. And I'm like, when will this be over? I'm so sorry I did this. And after the peak experience, I was the only American. Oso is Mexican-American, so he's bilingual, but no one else spoke English. All of a sudden, I heard everybody speaking English without an accent. I'm like, that's weird. And I understood everything that was being said. So the next day during integration, Sam was explaining to me, this is what happened with this lady last night. We were helping her. She was actually reliving some blocked childhood trauma. I said, yeah, she said this and she said that. I'm like, yeah, you got it. It's like, do I know more Spanish than I think I do? And he's like, no, this stuff is all encoded in our DNA. We all know everything. We don't need to know everything because we would go crazy. We have to have filters to function, for me to stand up here talking, for anything. We can't be aware of everything all the time. But when you're in the influence of the ayahuasca and Ibogaine especially, and I'm rabbit trailing here, I'll still answer your second question. With ayahuasca, you're in an observer state. So your body, mind, and soul are talking to each other. And that's happening with everyone in this room right now. But we're not aware of it. I actually had an image of my brain in the upper left-hand corner. It was like a graphic, and I could see all of the activity. It was really pretty cool. But you're in a detached state, so you can observe it. And with ayahuasca, you get that in a different way. With ayahuasca, you feel more of the love after you've gone through the dark part of the journey, which is about an hour. And your second question.
Well, it's not relevant because you said
Okay.
that Ibogaine doesn't make that choice.
I don't think so. I mean, I've never come across it, but I've only been doing this shit a year, so. One more question. Who did I neglect all this time? Oh, dear. Okay, I saw you first. Sorry.
Do you know anything about the efficacy of treating Parkinson's with Ibogaine?
I don't, but I know that there are some studies, and it could be really helpful. And in that context, it's done with microdosing. And that's the extent of my knowledge. We have time for here?
Yeah, that was sure. We got time.
Okay.
What does the monitoring picture look like for a patient seeking Ibogaine treatment?
Generally, it's about $5,000 to $7,000. There are places that will just crank you in and out in 3 days. Stay away from them. You also want to make sure if you're about to do it, check out the provider. Ask them for referrals from their own clients. Very, very important to, if you're going to do this, do it right and do it once, if at all possible. Thank you so much, everybody.